Welcome to the very first ever episode of Stupid Human Interviews, where I, the stupid human, gets to interview a hopefully less stupid human. So, pay attention. Today's guest needs no introduction. He is the author of the best-selling Amazon novel, The Guerrilla's Guide to the Baofeng Radio. Affiliate link below. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. BrushBeater.
Hey, hey.
So, Mr. BrushBeater, do you have a real name, or should I just call you Mr. Beater?
Just call me Matt, man. Everybody does.
Matt, all right.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so then, Matt, who is NC Scout?
Oh, that'd be me. That's it's a pen name I started using all the way back 11 September. It's interesting because we're recording this on 11 September. 11 September 2015, and got started. Kind of interesting origin story of the blog, the BrushBeater blog. I had real heavy night of drinking and was... 11 September for a lot of us out there, the GWAT guys, it can be kind of a rough day. And
the what guys?
The Global War on Terror, GWAT vets. You kind of think about a lot of things, I had written under a few pen names for some other blogs and stuff that kind of had went by the wayside, and back in that era. And there was one in particular that I'd written some things for, and whatever. There was drama with that guy, and it was just like, it's kind of time to take the bull by the horns and jump in there and get it going. And so launched a blog. Really don't remember launching it because again it was a pretty heavy night of drinking. There was a lot of liquor drinking. There was a lot of beer chasing it, and it was just one of those kind of deals. But it was like, man, I'm gonna launch a blog. What am I gonna call this thing?
What was that first blog about?
The BrushBeater blog. It's still up, brushbeater.org, and that's the one that kind of made me famous. Gained a big following for whatever reason. I was talking about a lot of different things on there originally. Stuff that I just learned in my experience when I was in the Army, a lot of communication stuff that was kind of an area that was lacking back then and still is now. Relevant information. I think that's really the big disconnect is relevant information. There's a disconnect. It's something that, you do in a very masterful way of pointing out that disconnect between the ham radio community, the amateur radio community, the kind of the license free stuff that's out there, and then GMRS and, all of these different things that kind of have their little fiefdoms, and people, especially online generally is where you see these conversations, and they kind of all exist in their own little communities, and they don't really get outside of that. And it's kind of like, when I was coming to this from a, my background in the Army, serving in the infantry, and combat arms, spent some time in one of the long range surveillance companies, doing some cool guy schools and 2 tours in Iraq, 1 in Afghanistan, and kind of seeing the weaponized end of this, I guess, is, how do you piece that together? How do you because, of all these communities out there, which each have a unique knowledge base, I guess, and unique personalities with it and everything, how do you marry all that information? How do you fuse that information into a workable product? Really for people who are, looking for off-grid capability, looking for, knowledge. And a lot of times I think that the gatekeeping that happens in each of those little fiefdoms sometimes can be pretty toxic. I know that some of the conversations can be. I've been privy to them. I've had a lot of, we both get that, the heat online. And hey, I mean, that's fine, but, there's really no need for it. Started launching classes after that just by request. I had a whole other career, um, a whole other thing that I was doing, and all these people started asking me. They were coming out of the woodwork, asked me for classes. So it was all private stuff. March of 2017, I launched my first open enrollment class here in North Carolina. Had a unexpectedly large turnout, which was really cool. And I didn't think that I could have this much fun on the civilian side. Immediately it took me, and I was only, a few years out of the Army at that point. Immediately it took me back to like my most fun times that I had when I was in the Army. Like, man, dude, I can have this much fun teaching people stuff. And I don't get that, 2 a.m. wake up call of like, hey, Sergeant, do you know where your troops are? You need to go get them out of jail or some bullshit, and it's like, dude, this is so much fun. Turned it, was able to turn this into a full-time profession. Would not write the book until many years later. Wrote the book, the Baofeng, the Baofeng book. Wrote it a
I
couple
think
of
we should
years
make
ago.
that clear. The correct pronunciation, as you would know because you wrote the book, is Boof Huang. For
Yeah,
anybody
yeah.
wondering, it is Boof Huang.
you know and the book, that book, writing it a couple of years ago, it was the 2nd of December of 2022 it was published. It was a product of conversations I had. I actually had a much longer book originally planned out and mostly written, and that unfortunately met a untimely end with a epic hard drive crash. Um, hey, things happen, but it was fortuitous. But a good friend of mine and someone who is pretty well known in the special operations community on the instruction side, uh, you know, said, "Hey, you need to do a book just on the Baofeng or the Bufwing, to be technical here, but you need to do a book just on that." Because this is, and he and a friend of his, they had just come back from a contract in Africa doing a security contract work. He said, you really need to do a book on Justice Radio because these are all over the world. Like everywhere we go, we see this is the most common radio in the world. And it might sound crazy, but nobody really knows how to use them. And I'm thinking like this is insane. There's literally whole skill sets are built around, using this equipment. So it's kind of crazy to me. But I took their advice and took the advice of another very close friend of mine, Chris Weatherman, Angry American, who said, hey, this is how you need to publish this, and did, and thankfully, as of today, I mean, it's still in Amazon's top 5,000 books. It's still a number one bestseller in its respective categories. It has impacted a lot of people out there in a positive way, which is exactly what I wanted. And it's gotten a lot of people knowledgeable. It's built that baseline skill level and created it, a baseline of skill and got it, that aggregate skill level, raised it up, which is exactly what I wanted it to do. And overcame a lot of the gatekeeping that happens in, the ham radio community. I mean, I'm a ham, I'm an amateur extra. But I'm not running around proselytizing the church of amateur radio or any of this stuff. It's like, look, you need a skill set. And here's the other thing too, is that, let's equate this to like firearms, for example. You want to learn how to run a rifle effectively to defend your home, right? Because a lot of people do. I get a lot of people in class that like, that's what they want. Well, you don't need to learn how to shoot that thing, 500 meters, 800 meters, 1,000 meters to be effective with it. You just need to learn how to run that thing effectively within a relatively short distance and be able to get confident in, not just hitting your target, but weapons manipulation, right? It's the same thing as it pertains to radio. I don't necessarily need a hobby, right? I'm not looking for a hobby. I'm not looking to become to like talk to people on the other side of the planet and run all these contests and stuff. I'm not necessarily worried about that. I'm worried about how do I create a competent system of communications for whatever the task might be. It may be, home defense. It may be, the grid has went down. We got a hurricane fixing to hit Louisiana. Okay, so cell phone service is going to be impacted. How do you create a local community network with effective tools without a lot of instruction? Okay, so how do you do that? You get a lot of guys from the ham radio community, and I mean, you know and love them, but they're going to sit there and they want to talk physics, and they want to sit and give you 7-hour course on, well, the difference between VHF and UHF is the propagation is, well, like, okay, you're not seeing the forest for the trees here. A lot of these people just want to know, how do I punch in some frequencies real quick, and like, how do I do this and not get in trouble, and create an effective network ad hoc. How do you do that? And so the book covers that, and then it goes into a lot deeper methods, clandestine communications. How do you do that? How if all of a sudden, let's say Red Dawn happens, and I'm not even saying here in America, but that the thing that people need to understand is that book was not just written for the American audience. It was written for an international audience. There's a lot of spots in the world where okay, yeah, would you like to have all the crazy high technology stuff? Yeah, dude, that would be awesome. Guess what? You ain't got that. You ain't got that. So how do you overcome those issues that, like, all right, this is what you got. Yeah, but I want that. It doesn't matter. This is what you got. So learn to work with the equipment that you have. Here's how you do it. If you had to do that, here's how you do it. Is it optimal? No. Maybe. Then again, maybe not. All right. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But here's how you use it. And in the 2 years since that book's been published, it's over 100,000 copies sold in both versions of it combined. So the mass market version that you've got, and the top spiral bound, which is available on my store on brushbeater.store. We've got over 100,000 copies sold of those versions combined. And the book has shown up, in all the NATO countries. I routinely get international client requests, which, I don't travel internationally. But these are all partner countries. I mean, we talk about, it's always in the news now, Ukraine and issues with NATO and CSTO and all that stuff, right? People are, citizens are training in Romania, citizens are training in the Baltic states, citizens are training in Poland. I get a lot of requests from Poland. And that book has played a major role in creating a basic aggregate level of communications capability. And that's really important to me, that it's been able to do that we've been able to achieve that, it's influencing something in a positive direction, and I'm very, very proud of it.
So it's called the Guerrilla's Guide to the Baofeng Radio. Again, affiliate link below. The one question that a lot of people have about it is, was it hard? Is it hard to teach gorillas how to use a radio? Because those buttons are really small. No. Real quick, a couple of things that that somebody would expect to learn, just off the top of your head, the top 4 or 5 things that someone would learn if they get the book. How much does the book cost? $22-23?
Yeah, it's 22 on Amazon if you want Amazon Prime shipping, but it is $19.99 on my site on brushbeater.store in both versions. So the top spiral
Okay.
bound version, which is a little smaller, quite a bit smaller. And, if you want a pocket sized version that's top spiral, so you can sit there and flip it like a Rolodex, or the mass market version, which is, larger and significantly easier to read. But, I would say top 4 or 5 things. The first thing is using your radio without a computer. This is one of the things that drives me up the doggone wall is that, guys are like, oh, you need to program that with, you gotta have program software. Like, okay.
Real men don't use computers. They do it the old fashioned way, like this.
Yeah, man. Yeah. One of the things, being in 11 Bravo, right? Being an infantryman in the Army, commo is not an infantryman's strong point, and communications, and we're on the receiving end. Like, we have to have our stuff working, and so when it doesn't work immediately, it's your fault, right? And you have to fix it. You can't just be like, hey, commo dudes, come fix my shit because it doesn't work. Like, that's no, when you ain't got no commo guys around. It's you got to fix that crap. So you don't have a magic laptop. You don't have a magic toy to, like, you don't have this magic smoke to just like make all this stuff happen. And so there's so many people that, especially the ones that come from the ham radio world. And I will say too, like the typical survivalist prepper type folks, that there was an era where they just, for whatever reason, they're talking about everything's going to be grid down this, grid down that, but they're doing everything with their computers. And that blew my mind. It's like, throw that shit away. You don't need that. Learn to work without it. You don't need a doggone computer for every little thing you're doing. Why don't you live without these devices for a little while? You'll be a lot happier for it. I promise. The big thing is learning to program your radio to use ad hoc, right? Ad hoc, meaning suboptimal. We're just putting together a network right now, get it on the air, make it work. That's the big one, right? That's number one. The second big thing is antenna theory, understanding the basic nuts and bolts of antenna theory, because antennas are always like this magic thing that people just don't, they think an antenna is something you buy, right? And it blows people's minds. I mean, the book's been out for a couple of years now. I've been writing about antenna theory, and a lot of the articles on the blog back in the days, improvised antennas. Why are they so doggone important? Here's why. And it explains it in the book, but it also explains some of the science behind it. And I think one of the greatest compliments that I ever got on the book was it came from an engineer, and he meant it to be an insult, but I kind of turned the tables on him. And he was like, "Oh, your antenna chapter was not very good." And I said, "What do you mean by that? Like, can you explain to me what wasn't good about it?" Because I obviously I'm open to constructive criticism for sure. And he said, "Well, scientifically, this, that, and the other," and he starts spitting out, word salad essentially. And I said, "Well,
That right there tells you did a good job.
well,
When some people come and tell you that it wasn't
yeah,
technical enough,
right."
That's how you know you did it right.
I gave him I mean, he wasn't trying to be that guy. It was just that, engineers typically are a way, like they have their way about them. And I said, you got to understand something, are you an electrical engineer? And he said, yeah, I said, so understand that I did not write this for you. Okay. You have mountains of, RF theory and electrical theory and antenna design. And you have a whole master's degree coursework in that. Okay. You understand that, but I'm not dealing with those people. First of all, I don't have that. My work's in sociology, right? I'm not, I'm not a physicist. I'm not an engineer of any type. But how can you explain antenna theory to someone that doesn't have that background? How do you do that? And so you have to, it's like, Prometheus bringing the fire down. that's that gatekeeping, whether it was intentional or not. That happens. And the amateur radio world, by the way, is dominated by a lot of, engineers, electrical. There are tons of electrical engineers in it, for good and bad. It's a great thing because you learn so much. If you want to go in that direction, you absolutely can. But everybody's got to have a jumping off point of like, okay, I understand now why this does what it does. So, for example, we do a step by step on how to build a jungle antenna, right? The jungle antenna or 292 antenna, very simple to build, very easy to build. Why would you want to build one when I can just buy this stuff offline, right? You just buy. Well, that thing that you bought offline might break. And then what are you gonna do, right? But I also like get my inner MacGyver on. Like we kick on the MacGyver theme music. I pull out my little pocket knife. I start scraping the wires. I'm doing all the things. Right. It's just cool to get on the air and be like, yeah, I talked 47 miles on an antenna I built. And I put it together on this Baofeng, right? And everybody said, oh, that ain't gonna work. You can't do that. Yeah, I did. I just did. Right. So that's two things right there. Third thing I would say is communications planning. Communications planning and the ability to plan, whatever it might be. Let's go back to our example of, hurricane hits. Or, you're out in California, wildfires, right? Wildfires is a big, big, big thing. Frequent thing happens every single year, right? It's a major threat. And it takes out your cell phone service. Okay. So, we've got this massive natural disaster, man-made disaster, whatever it might be, and cell phones are down. Our conventional means of communications have just went down. How are we going to create a network over our neighborhood or our county or whatever it is? And you don't have the ability to say, well, oh, well, we'll just do, whatever the standing thing was. Well, that may not work, man. That might not be an option. So here's how you create a competent communications plan. Here's how you do that. And then dovetailing that, here's how you relay information. Like here's the real way that you relay information. So that's three things right there. The fourth thing I would say is understanding real world communication security. Right, communication security is not achieved through digital encoding alone. That's only part of it. And, I really go deep into the weeds in this in the signals intelligence book that I wrote. But, understanding that and understanding how to achieve that. Right. So that would be 4 and 5 and covered in chapter 6, dealing with digital data bursts, dealing with encryption, how to do that in a competent way, and how to include multiple layers in that. And so, it really takes the reader from ground zero and creates that communications capability completely across the board up to a high level. And it gives you exercises. I mean, these are all jumping off points. Every chapter is a jumping off point of, hey, I could do that. There's a mental exercise here. I could do that. Let's go out and try that. And maybe it might work. Maybe you need a little bit of help along the way. Hey, that's fine. Right. It's the book is literally written to be a textbook for how to do the things that you need to be able to do. Right. And so, every chapter is essentially a skill level.
Yeah. And I actually, when I read through it, learned quite a few things. So it's, again, Guerrilla's Guide to the Baofeng Radio. You'll link below. All right. Now let's talk about some important stuff. How many Jeeps do you currently own? 0. Oh, all right.
0.
What kind of Jeep do you want to buy?
If I were to buy a Jeep today, like if I could own any Jeep ever built in the history of Jeeps, it would be a CJ8 Scrambler. CJs, back when AMC built them, that was kind of that golden era of the Jeep prior to the Chrysler buyout of AMC. So prior to 1988, when the YJ came out. So when you had the CJs, you had the 5, which was, small, and that was a real cool vehicle. Like, I might get in trouble for saying this. I don't think I will with you, but somebody will be like, "Oh my god!" Like Jeep purists. But the Mahindra Roxor, is a CJ2. That's such a cool little vehicle. But the CJ5 was essentially the same footprint, right? The same size vehicle. Then you had the CJ7, which was larger and could accommodate up to the 360 AMC, which I mean, you're talking about a real lightweight vehicle with heavy duty axles under it. And because I think they ran up to Dana 60s, if I remember right. Then you've got the 360 AMC, which is just was a hell of an engine in a lightweight package. I mean, that was awesome. But you make it even better by throwing that truck bed on the back of it, and now you got the CJ8 Scrambler. It was the coolest Jeep, and it's something. I had a buddy with a Scrambler who lives down in Asheville, and I haven't talked to him in many years, but he very likely still has one. Man, that was a topic of conversation everywhere he went. Somebody was like, "Holy shit, what is that?" And this was the days before the Jeep Centurion, like that they've got out now, and of course they've got the Unlimited with the truck bed on it now that's out there. But the original CJ8, that thing was a hoss. It was that era of Jeeps were probably the best ones of all time. The TJs were great too, but that CJ5, CJ7, and CJ8 were just epic, man.
And not like the minivan that I drive. Is it true that real men only drive Jeeps?
Well, not
it's true.
Only.
The correct answer is it's true. When we talked the other day, you told me that you like to go predator hunting. How does that work? And do you just tell them to meet you at the mall or at the park? And do you get in trouble? How does that work?
Yeah, man. It was like that show where they would answer Craigslist.
Yeah, there used to be a TV show. Yeah.
Yeah.
What is your latest predator? What kind of predators do you go after?
Oh, coyotes. Coyotes.
What are they predating against? Your dogs? Your cats?
Calves, young cows. They are coyotes are they're an interesting creature because coyotes are one of the most adaptable species that you find in the wild. They can literally live anywhere, suburban areas, everywhere from desert to thick pine jungle, as we call it here in North Carolina. But anywhere in between, they are urban areas. They can exist. They can eat literally anything because they're omnivores. But they predate on anything that they can opportunistically hunt. Typically, coyotes will have a pack of 3 traditionally, but when they can support larger numbers and they have enough prey for that, they go in significantly higher numbers in their packs. And we're just overrun with them. I mean, on the East Coast and the Southeast, anywhere where you have creek bottoms, you've got a lot of cattle, goats, any kind of livestock, they're going to be a real menace. And the thing is that they really don't have any natural predators. Whereas, out west, they have wolves that are kind of predators on them. They've got a lot of other, bears and stuff. We've got black bear here. They're not really a threat to coyotes at all. And they're just overrun. So it's a great opportunity to, protect your livestock, number one. It's also a great training opportunity. Getting out there with your rifle, thermal, night vision, kind of integrating all of that stuff. Because you got to think about it like this. If this animal's entire genetic history that led up to its birth and all the selective breeding, natural selection, everything led up to it, built its every sense around being an effective predator, and particularly at night, by the way, and you as a human can defeat that. You got to think that that's very effective, and so we all train for those defensive scenarios and defensive firearms use and all that stuff, right? So if you can learn to overcome a predator whose every sense is built around not just its survival, which is a prey mentality, but around killing prey, hunting and killing prey, then you become the apex predator. In my mind, there's nothing more empowering than that. There's nothing more, there's a lot of guys out there, all these alpha male camps and this bullshit where, people are standing around in their ranger panties and hoodies and like yelling at other men and stuff. I don't know what all that's about. I'm telling you, just get you a rifle, get out there, find you somebody that's raising livestock and be like, look, I'm going to sit out here tonight and hunt some coyotes. That's all the alpha male you need. Okay. That's all that you need. You get a little bit of blood on that rifle, get a notch on that stock, drop something, protect that livestock. That's all the alpha male you need. Okay. I don't need some dipshit yelling at me to make me feel like more of a man. Okay. I don't do that. We don't need.
It sounds
where
fun,
I came
but
from, we don't yell. So
I live in California, so it sounds fun. On an average day, what do you do? I see pictures of you on X, dressed all up like G.I. Joe and doing cool stuff. Are you getting paid for that?
I did when I took those photos. The
Is that part of your classes?
Some of the photos that make it up there do come from class. The profile pic actually came from Afghanistan. That was the conclusion of a mission that I was particularly proud of. We interdicted a very important target that day. That was a big payoff, and that guy had harmed a lot of Americans, myself included, and had facilitated the death of a lot of Americans in southern Afghanistan. And so being able to take him off the battlefield that day, to me, that's something that I'm very proud of. Afghanistan, obviously it was what it was. And, today we're recording this on 9/11. Let's put it like this. That was the day that I was very proud. That made me proud to be an American, made me damn proud to be a soldier. And being able to take that guy off the battlefield that day, that was, very, very proud of it. There was a massive effort to get that dude, and because he facilitated the deaths of a lot of Americans in the Arghandab River Valley, and being able to nab that dude and reduce his effectiveness, eliminate his effectiveness, was a big deal.
So let's talk about the elephant in the room. When the zombies attack and the shits hit the fan, am I allowed to use my Baofeng UV5R to dial 911 for help if I don't have a FCC's license?
I don't know how you dial 911. You could like get a phone patch.
Well, that's the problem. If you haven't read the Guerrilla's Guide to the Baofeng radio, a lot of people just think they're going to pick it up and dial 911. That's not how it works. That's not how any of this works.
There's a lot of hoops to jump through there. I mean, if you're running some sort of a repeater with a phone patch on it, if you even know what that is, in theory you could. But what I'll tell you is that number one, yeah, you can. Here's how you do it. All right, you're not dialing 911 necessarily, but find out if your sheriff's department, or more probably a little easier here, you have a volunteer fire department or a fireman's auxiliary. Find out when they're having their meetings and get involved. Everybody, it's one of those things in the prepper survivalist world, right? Everybody has this, like, or at least for a while, it's nice to see this changing, but everybody kind of had this like lone wolf mentality of like, oh, it's going to be me on my homestead, Dude, that's not how it works. Like, that's never how it's ever worked. Like, that's all a Hollywood myth. You need to be involved in your community, deeply involved in it. And for the people that are like, well, they just don't get it. No, you don't get it. They got to figure it out. You don't have it figured out. Don't be a misfit. Go with the flow. Not everything has to be about doomsday, apocalypse, whatever. maybe you ought to just be an asset to your community. And then when things require that escalation, then, you know, you cross that bridge when you come to it. But till then,
Yeah, the
be
community
an asset.
getting involved with everybody with the community and having a plan, I think, is a part that a lot of people forget about or don't think about.
Well,
And they're all planning. They're planning for the zombies walking down the street, and they forget about the hurricanes that come every year, or the earthquakes, or like you said earlier, the wildfires.
so
They forget about all that boring shit hit the fan stuff.
yeah, I mean, you know, way more realistic scenario. This is going to.
I'm surrounded by wildfires right now. I got
yes,
and they took down a critical infrastructure site where my favorite GMRS repeater is, literally straight across the valley.
I hate it when that happens.
And stuff like that happens every year or two, and then we get earthquakes every once in a while.
And I want to point something out because I'm sure you get all the wonderful comments, so you get to counter troll them, which is great. I love.
I can't wait for the comments.
But you know, this isn't to underscore the likelihood of social calamity. Okay, it's happening. It's likely. It's going to continue to happen. That's fine. But what do you think? Do you think that you're going to go toe to toe with all this stuff by yourself? Like it's just me and my Colt Python, like Rick from The Walking Dead. You know, like dude, this isn't real. You still have to be like, you know, right now in the news, everybody's talking about, you know, the zombie Haitians eating cats and stuff. Like, all right, cool. But it's true. They are. There's videos of it. It happened. We all saw it, right? We all saw those videos. They're eating people's cats on front lawns. They're doing that. This is what they do. But the thing is here to remember is that, like, that's all right. So Springfield, Ohio, and several other communities out there where these things are happening. You've got Tren de Aragua coming from Venezuela. These guys are bad news. You've got Chinese triads that are coming in. These guys are bad news. Okay, cool, man. Well, you're not necessarily the dude that's tasked with dealing with that, okay, in all cases. Now, you might have to, but it probably isn't going to be you, right? But what you do need to do is to be in a position to facilitate aid to that, right, to the counter effort against that. And so how do you do that? That you don't just show up on day one when the shit's going down and be like, hey, guys, I'm here to help. I got my rifle. They're probably going to see you as a threat too, right? Because you're being a nuisance at that point. You don't know anybody. You don't know anybody. You ain't ever worked with nobody. They don't know what you know. They don't know what you know. You don't know what they know. You don't know what they're read on to. You're probably going to be a nuisance. So here's the deal. You get involved with these programs now. And that's why I said, you know, sheriff's department usually will have a sheriff's auxiliary. And, you know, for the people that are going to run around, well, I talk to them and they don't know. Well, you know, you don't know. You're the problem. And then, you know, with the fire department, you know, if you live in a very rural area like I do, where everything is volunteer fire departments, get involved with them. They always need help on something. I ain't telling you, you know, you got to get on a truck and always be on call. But what I'm telling you is be there to do something. Just show up. Just show up. That and they're going to look at you like, you know, because there's other people in your community. They're going to begin to look at you like, oh, you know, that's Matt over there. He, you know, he's not a fireman, but he shows up and he helps pack out the trucks. That's important. You need to have that. You know, he makes sure that everything's fueled up. Okay, cool. You know, and you're involved. You become a known person at that point. You know, you're not just some face in the crowd. You're not just some name out there. People are going to begin to view you as an asset to the community rather than a detriment. That's a very important position to be in, because I'm going to tell y'all something. I've said this many times, said it on my own podcast. A community protects what it values, and that includes people. But it also, and I saw this in Iraq, many examples of this in Iraq, they'll turn a blind eye to somebody they don't give a shit about. Like, oh, yeah, we don't care about him. We'll feed him to the wolves. We don't care. Don't be that guy.
So when I'm out and about and I'm off-roading and I have to get out of the Jeep and use my radio, my current favorite radio is my Rocky Talkie, not the Baofeng.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite radio when I'm actually out adventuring. What's your favorite radio, or the radio that you recommend the most for when the shits hit the fan?
Oh man, that's easy.
Or do you recommend different radios for different flavors that we
I'd
should
say
fan like we talked about?
what all right, so what lives in my truck? I've got one in each truck, and this is what lives in my truck for getting in and out, because I have, my mobile radios, which are, higher powered, that are in my vehicles too. But handheld radio, that one's easy. It's a Baofeng AR 152. It's not a UV5R. I mean, those are small and
Wait. I think
I think you got one. Yeah,
bet.
there you go. There
that's
you
the big
go.
boy
Got
radio
one. Yeah.
compared to the little. They're both Baofengs, but yeah, that is a nice radio. Unlocked, if I remember.
Yep.
Correct.
So they're wide
Tell
open.
boys and girls at home what unlocked means.
So they're wide open. You can transmit on the license free stuff. You can transmit on amateur radio. You can transmit anywhere, right? So the 136 to 174 in VHF. So that full range. You can also transmit in 400 to 512 megahertz. So that entire range as well. So everything from GMRS/FRS to amateur radio to MERS, which is kind of the VHF equivalent to FRS. Literally all of that stuff. You can do all that. So I want to talk about why I like that radio so much. Yeah, I mean,
all right, hold on, but I think we should point out the reason that you like that, and the reason that I like those. You call it an open radio. I call it unlocked radio. You just said you can transmit on all those frequencies. What a lot of people may not realize is if you buy a GMRS radio, or you buy a MERS radio, or you buy most new, even a UV5R ham radio today, the newer ones, or most ham radios, they're all locked so that they can only transmit on their little band that the FCC put the sticker on that says they're allowed to transmit on. Whereas you get something like an unlocked UV5R or the AR-152, what do we call that? Was it? Big boy that we showed you.
Yeah.
152.
So
transmits on almost everything, which makes it very valuable.
Yeah. And it looks, it's named after the Harris 152, the Falcon 3. Like it's built to look like that. I don't care.
Well, it's an assault radio. That's what AR stands for, right? AR?
Yeah, assault
radio. I saw that. I think I saw that on the news.
Yeah. I mean, I'm surprised.
They told me that's what AR stands for.
Yeah, Kamala Harris is going to try and ban them. We're going to confiscate the AR 152s
Your
on
radios.
day one. I gotta say it with a real twang if I'm doing Kamala. We're gonna ban them on day one. She just has to gin it up every time she's talking. But anyway, no, I like those. I prefer them to everything else. They live in the truck. I don't really care about the form factor. I've seen people like, oh, that's just a military wannabe looking radio. Like, dude, no, I don't care about any of that. Here's the thing. All right, so if I'm moving around at night doing something, in and out of my truck, right? If I'm moving around at night, I don't have to pull out a flashlight to read the screen. Like in low light without the backlight, right? I'm cutting all that stuff off, all the backlights, all the stuff off. I don't want any of that for noise and light discipline. I can actually still read the screen because the screen's large on that, right? So I can still read the screen.
Very easy to read.
The buttons are large. So if I'm wearing gloves, as I frequently am, when I'm out in the woods, I'm wearing gloves, I can index the controls of the radio with gloves on where I can't do that with other radios. The third thing that I really like about it is the battery life. It has a 1.2 amp hour battery. So what that means for the laity out there.
Huge battery.
We got the biggest battery. You won't even believe it. We have such big batteries. They're huge. They're big. Look at them. They're batteries. They're beautiful batteries. They're large capacity. They've got a really long standby time, run time on them. And, the other thing is they're not weatherproof. They don't have a weather resistance rating, but I've taken them apart. And, the first couple that I got to kind of T&E and play with, and they have rubber membranes in them where they're needed. So hey, that's cool. Like this is a big deal. But you know,
And
so
if it's not, even if it's not waterproof and you drop it in the lake, it's 60,
yeah,
$70, you buy another one. It's not like
yeah,
a
exactly.
$500 radio.
Yeah, this is something you're going to beat the crap out of. Like, and let's talk about like another elephant in the room because I know somebody's going to bring it up. Well, why wouldn't it be a Yaesu or whatever? Like, all right,
Because what
so
kind of a moron is going to get a $400, $500 radio and run around out in the adventuring or
there's
tech-defying,
that.
whatever you guys call it?
Yeah. The other problem is that with the like the Yaesu VX6R and VX7R, right? I own both of those. Comparatively speaking, because there's a lot of comparison. Frequently, I'll get that. Why don't you recommend that? You just sell those Baofeng ready. Why don't you have the whatever? Mimicking the voices of people that send me those kinds of emails. The reason is that one, they have tiny little buttons that each of those buttons has three functions at a minimum. Like if you ever try to program a Japanese radio on the fly by hand, it's a lesson in frustration. Right? The Japanese are great at doing a lot of things, but simplicity of complex electronics is not one of them. Okay, and so it's very, very complicated to use those things. The other thing is very short battery life on them. Very short battery life. I've not seen a Japanese built radio from any of their of the major brands, Kenwood, Icom, Yaesu, none of them that has a competent battery life on them for more than a few hours. So and I'm even talking about the really really high end stuff, like the Kenwood D74 or whatever it is, TH74. That's the one that does like all the digital modes and everything in it. Nice looking radio. When you can get that hour of window of it working, But I want something that is simple to operate that I can memorize the controls when it's dark and I'm cold and I'm not thinking the best and I haven't had my caffeine and I'm calorie deprived and all the things
Yeah,
under
very
stress.
different from
Yeah,
sitting on the couch, which is what those guys that you were talking about earlier
yeah.
are generally using their radios from. Big difference
Mm-hmm.
to when you're actually using it for, well, not what it's designed for what you use them
Well,
for. Big
yeah.
difference.
So, case in point, I had a couple of guys in class a few months ago. They brought a lot of high end gear to class, a lot of high end equipment to class. And, I could tell that the two of them have been hams for a long time. And, this class is a very big, there were a lot of people in this course. I think I had like 30 people in there. It's kind of average for me is about 20. But this is a big class. And, you know, these guys, the two of them were pretty knowledgeable on technical end stuff. But when it came to actually troubleshooting their gear, they were struggling, and what they realized was that with their one of them had a Yaesu VX6, and intermittently during the blocks of instruction, he's like wanting to talk to me a lot and everything. Would it's cool, but he's bragging on his radio, and he's like, "Oh yeah, this is this and this is that." Well, literally in the next block of instruction, he couldn't do any of the things that we were doing. Like and it was stuff that isn't necessarily specific to Baofeng's. It's the fact that we're transmitting on one frequency and we're receiving on another, so we're running a dual band mode. Well, he couldn't do that. And he's like, "Well, I can't make this work." That's yeah, I know. You know, you didn't think about this one. Then we get out to the field and we're doing stuff, and and they couldn't. They had a hard time with some of the basic things that we were doing, and it was an equipment hindrance. It was because their equipment wasn't built to do the things that we were doing, and it did not have that capability inherent in it. And so they were kind of lost in the sauce because they showed up with the mindset of, well, we've got the nicest equipment here. Hey, that's cool, man. Try and, try and do what we're trying to do with it. You can't do all of that stuff because, and I told them when one of them, he was a little disappointed about something and was kind of lamenting it a little bit to me. And I said, and I think you understand, this is not an amateur radio course. I'm not trying to make people hams. I'm trying to make you an effective communications person, right? Understand how to use your equipment in a field setting. It's a very different thing than being a ham. Total different world. If you want to be a ham, that's fine. Go to a ham radio club. You don't need to be here. You don't need me for that. This is a different thing. This is a horse of a complete different color, and so once I put it that way, then they understood and everything was okay. But they didn't really know, I think, what they were getting into.
What is a mesh tastic?
Junk.
Yeah, I think you're the first person I've heard to say that, because that's what I think. I think it's fiddly, unreliable. I think some people think it's the greatest thing ever because it is so fiddly. And I'm sure some are, but I'm just talking about regular dorks that I see in the forums, going on and on about how great it is because it's so fiddly and it's so technical and it's going to save the world. But I want something that's reliable, easy, right out of the box I can start using.
So mesh networking.
Used any? Yeah.
Oh yeah. So mesh networking, what it is, so we can define terms to the audience here. It is a radio that sends a constant signal linking one device to another, right? And when device, you can use it to go from one tablet to another. Usually that's how it's interfaced, or cell phones. So in worst case, the cell phones from one thing to another, right? And it has a constant linking protocol. Anyone that ever tells you, and I could name some names, but I'm not going to do it. Anybody that ever tells you that it creates a store and forward network, no, you're full of shit. It does not. It has to be linked together.
It's synchronous, right?
Right. It's continuous synchronous. It's not store and forward. It's bullshit. Whoever tells you that, all their information needs to go in the trash. Okay, so here's what it's doing. It's sending out that signal continuously, and the main selling points that crowd will try and sell you on is one, it doesn't require a license to use. Yeah, well, neither does your radio when you're using an FRS.
Neither does mine.
And I control the RF, the point where it's transmitting where it isn't. You can't do that with mesh networks. The second thing is
it's always transmitting, telling everybody listening exactly where you are.
The second point they make is that it's encrypted. But that's the thing. Whenever somebody gives you qualitative terms rather than quantitative, quantify that encryption. All right. So I've got a buddy and somebody that I've had in class multiple times, somebody I have a lot of respect for. He's a cybersecurity researcher. And just as a little experimentation, he bought one of these mesh devices. The more well-known one, I'm not going to name names, but the one that is most dominant in the marketplace, which has also found its way into government use, by the way, unfortunately, and probably will be exiting soon because it's got a lot of people killed in Ukraine because of all the pitfalls that I'm pointing out. But he literally broke the encryption on it, and it didn't take him a whole lot to do it. It by literally snagging the Bluetooth carrier itself, because that's how it's working, and just broke the thing, right? So let's talk about this. All right, it's operating in a very high end of the band, up into the Bluetooth range, and you don't the old cordless phone band. All the way up into the Bluetooth Wi-Fi frequency range. You're talking about very short distance there, where you have to have a bunch of nodes together that are all transmitting. So the other thing that all the mesh networking idiots will talk about is, or they'll tout, is saying, well, you could just hide in the noise floor of routers and everything. No, you can't, because you have that is stupid to say that. Only an idiot would say something like that, because I could literally take a spectrum analyzer, anyone with a spectrum analysis capability, and that's every SDR that's out there, and I can look at the signal and see what it is on a pan adapter. So it's just stupid. I mean, these are all, this is all copes. And let me tell you where it comes from. People who don't want to learn the basics, they just want to buy bullshit, right? They want to buy some magic talisman that makes them fucking feel better about themselves. That's what they do. They buy this crap. And then they turn around and they say, oh, well, it does all the things. I implore you to find 10 people that have used this in any effective way. And I can tell you this too about the .mil world who keeps wanting to do this. It's only an idea on paper, by the way. Nobody has effectively made this thing work in any possible like real world way. The only ones that tried to do it were in Ukraine. And guess what happened to them? They turned into drone targets. So, you know, why do you want to keep doing that? Why do you want to keep, but they can't. See, when you look at who the people are that advocate this kind of thing, then you begin to understand that these are not serious people. These are not people that we take seriously. These are not people that are going to do anything useful in any measurable way. So, you know, get rid of them. All right.
Tell us what
Focus
you
on
really
the fundamentals. All right. It's just like, we'll go back to the firearms example. Focus on the fundamentals. There is no whiz bang technology that's going to make you a better shooter. Okay, there is no magic trick that's going to circumvent that trigger time that you need, right? It's the same with any other skill. You don't magically become a master carpenter overnight. You don't become a master welder overnight. You don't become a master plumber overnight, or any other trade you can think of. Why is radio any different? You need to understand there's a fundamental foundational level. And if you're going to rebut that in your head, whoever's listening to this, you're going to rebut that by saying, yeah, well, I don't have time to learn another skill. Well, and guess what? You won't learn that skill, period. Somebody else will. Somebody else will, and they'll exploit that gap of where you were lazy.
Are you excited about and looking forward to this year's election? And what is your favorite part of election season?
Well, you know, well, it's a great election season. Let me first say that, you know, there are a lot of elections out there, and of course, I am running. And
it's a very good Donald Trump, by the way.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you. I do enjoy impersonations of people. I do them quite a bit for a lot of people. But I mean, you know, I just look at politics for what it is. You know, I think if people need to not look at politics and political things as a spectator sport, because that's what they have been brainwashed to see it as, but rather understand that politics is the manifestation of power. It is the outward expression of power. And so if you are armed with that mindset, you begin to understand what the role of politicians are, and you begin to look local. You're going to understand a whole lot more about the way things work. And yeah, that's an uncomfortable conversation, because yes, people have sold you out. People have sold you out. Your government has sold you out, and they've done it routinely and repeatedly, and they'll continue to do it. It's a dangerous conversation that I don't think a lot of people are prepared to have, at least at this point. But the critical thing to take away from that is that regardless of the outcome of November, your community needs you more than any other thing, right? Than anything else that's out there. Your community needs you. Be an asset to your community. So in the wake of the election, however it turns out, there's going to be a lot of people who say, you know, oh, we got to go do this, we got to go do that. Well, first, I want everybody to ask themselves, first of all, who is this we, right? Are they local to me? Are they part of my community? Are they somebody that can make a difference out there? Yes or no? You know, and I think that there were a lot of people on January 6th, 4 years ago, who probably would be a lot better off if they had stopped and thought about that. You know, wait a minute, what's the end goal here? I get it. You're angry. I'm angry too. Look, I started a blog. I started training people. I wrote books, did everything because I was angry. because and it wasn't just 9/11 2001, it was 9/11 2012 too. That absolutely infuriated me. I looked at that like, Benghazi, I looked at that like, if they're willing to do that, feed those guys to the wolves, that's some of America's very best right there, and an ambassador. They're willing to feed those guys to the wolves because they absolutely did. All right, there were some of us that absolutely saw it. I happened to have been in a school at the time where we were battle tracking this thing before it happened, right? And we saw the whole the aftermath of the Libyan civil war, the fall of Gaddafi, everything, how it was leading up to this. This is where it's going, and so they're willing to feed those poor souls to the wolves, man, including an ambassador. An ambassador. What do you think they would do with me? What do you think that they would do with anybody? Now, we're not pawns in this game, and we're the people who love America the most. And so that was something that's very difficult to wrap your brain around, for a while, because you're so angry about that. And you knew the other thing too is that they lied to us. They lied to our faces. They lied to our faces repeatedly, and they continue to do it. Hey, that's fine. I'm not going to go out. You can't. You have to have a measured response to things. You can't go out and lose your head. You can't go out and act stupid. You can't go out and do things that are counterproductive. You go out and you do things that are productive. How can you influence change? How can you influence something in a positive direction? How do you do that? And so that's what I sought to do, and that's what I continue to do. And I implore everybody to do that. When it comes to politics, hey, national level politics, you're going to do the best you can do with it. And that's not a black pill at all. You do the best you can do. Cast your vote. Get out there. Make your voice be heard. Try and magnify your voice in as many ways as you can. That's all you can do at the end of the day. But you can get very involved at the local most level. And if you're that person that's out there that's gravely concerned about the direction of our country, I'm telling you, there's a whole lot of people in Springfield, Ohio right now that are looking at their local level politics and saying, how in the world did this happen? Your local politicians are how that happened. And you can influence change there, whether you think you can or not. I promise you can.
And I don't give a shit anymore about any of them. I don't trust any of them. This question is from a viewer. It's a very important question. Do you know what a Colorado campfire is?
I know what a Dakota fire is.
Colorado campfire. Okay. Don't look it up. Viewers, do not look that up. This is a long question, multiple part. How many guns do you have? And why do you have them? Because I heard on the news that they're dangerous. And I heard that if you have too many of them, the ATF will come and burn your house down with all your babies in it, like what happened to the guy in the picture behind me in Texas. Is that true?
Well, I'll punt on the first question. I have enough.
Fair enough. That is the correct answer, by the way. That is the correct answer. I have
enough firearms. I say the second question, why do I have them? You got to deal with the predators. Plain and simple. Yeah, if I were the person in charge of America, which I have zero desire to be, but if I was, because that's too stressful for me. I'm doing good doing what I'm doing. But if I was the person in charge, I would want America to be as heavily armed as possible. I would take pride in that. Any competent national leader should take pride in that, because you shouldn't fear your populace. Number one, you shouldn't fear them. They're armed. They're not going to overthrow the government or any crazy stuff. They're loyal to America because you give them a reason to be loyal. Don't do shady things. How about that? Don't do shady things. Don't stab your people in the back. Don't dump off people that aren't like them in the middle of the night and then gaslight them into saying, "Oh no, that didn't happen. They're normal. They're just like you. No, they're not eating your cats on your front lawn. No, that's not happening." Yeah, but and people have a right to be armed. People have a right to petition government. That's the reason the Second Amendment exists. Is to say, hey, we're not going to take this laying down. They put the Second Amendment in there. The American Revolution in the Northeast kicked off. It was, it had already been going on indirectly in the South, but it kicked off in the Northeast because of a gun confiscation order, ironically enough. A lot of people don't know that. It wasn't just the taxation issues. It was actually a government confiscation order. The British government said, you're going to walk through, you're going to collect up the firearms. These guys are getting out of control. These Sons of Liberty, we got to disarm these boys. It's, we got to turn down the heat. Had they been a fair government, had they been a representative government of the people, as were peacefully redressed for decades leading up to the American Revolution, decades, that wouldn't have happened. These things wouldn't have happened. There wouldn't have been any violence because it wouldn't have been necessary, right? That's the reason that you need to be armed. You need to be just as well armed as government. I mean, and the representation of power, because when law enforcement, because you got to think about that too. Law enforcement represents, that's the physical, outward, explicit manifestation of that local political power. They work to protect whatever the economic interest is for that locale. That's it, plain and simple. Now, that's neither good, bad, indifferent, doesn't matter. That's just reflective of the truth, right? The whole reason that they care about like community policing and all this stuff is so that, they maintain a healthy labor force in an area that's tranquil. So, people ain't going to go to work if they don't feel safe going to work. That's the reason that police do that. You go outside the United States, the role of police is very different. They ain't worried about, intervening in a drunken domestic violence incident and, some dude's beating his wife up or whatever. They don't care about that kind of thing. Even in Europe, they're not worried about that. They're called gendarmerie because they are literally the home guard. They're there for domestic tranquility. You are not going to cause a ruckus in public. We don't care what you do in your home. You're not going to cause a ruckus in public. And if you do, this is what's going to happen to you, right? They're a manifestation of power, the centralization of power. That's their role. So how it pertains to firearms is, naturally there's going to be a buffer there, right? There's going to be, like in the movie Tombstone, for example, you watch Tombstone, they romanticize the Earps and everything. The Earps were just as big as scumbags as the Cowboys were. Like, unpopular opinion there, but they were. I love that movie. It's one of my favorite movies. But Wyatt Earp, you look at the real Wyatt Earp and the Earp family, these dudes were reprobates, man. They were no better than any of the other guys. They just ended up getting a badge, because they were on the right side of things. But there were guys that were in the Cowboys that were badged too. Johnny Behan and all that. Like, they don't do a good, Hollywood paints a picture in one way or another. But what I'm saying is there's that famous scene where Sam Elliott is nailing up the order out there, and he's saying, nobody's saying you can't have a gun. You just can't have a gun in town. And everybody's real angry. Well, why did they do that? They did that because they were protecting their business interest. Like, you hear that. Now you go back and watch that movie, you see it in a whole other light. Like, oh, wait a minute. They didn't do it because it was, it's the noble thing to do. There's the kids in the streets might get run over by, wild cowboys or whatever. No, that ain't what it was. They literally were stomping in on their prostitution and gambling business that they had running. The Cowboys were the organized gang was they had a competing interest, and they went head to head. That's what it was all about. People act shocked when law enforcement. There's a Supreme Court case. Law enforcement is not required to protect you in public. They have no obligation. No obligation. You got to think about that. And again, I'm not trying to beat up on law enforcement at all. At all. It's to make people more aware of what their real role is and what it isn't. And this is why you need to be armed. Because at the end of the day, I'm breaking it down really simple. Even simpler here is that, like, if my home got broken into, I live in a rural county, man. They don't have the resources to deal with that instantaneously. They ain't going to get here. I ain't going to, call 911 and they'll magically show up and save the day. I got to deal with that myself. And, an hour later when they show up, okay.
Let's take the report of the guy that's dead in your hallway.
Yeah. Now it's time to take statements. You know, I'm telling you, when seconds count, you know, or when minutes count, rather, seconds are an eternity. You have to be prepared to deal with that kind of thing. And so if you're not, you need to get yourself there. And I hope that there are a lot of things in the news right now that are a wake up call to a lot of people. You know, a big one being, I keep kind of semi joking about it. You know, well, she's eating a cat in my front yard. Yeah, you might ought to get out there and deal with that. You know, Tren de Aragua, which is taking over apartment complexes in Aurora, Colorado, El Paso, Texas now. You know, that can't happen in Texas. We don't put up with that in Texas. It just happened. You know, Chicago. I mean, it's going to happen in a lot of other places. And this is just beginning. And so, you know, you got to understand, like I used that old West analogy. Hey, we're kind of getting back into that era. Why was everybody armed back in the old West days? Like Wild West, all those stories. Everybody was armed back then. Why? Because they needed to be, because there wasn't enough law enforcement to go around. You know, you didn't have that. You might have one town marshal. That's it. That's all you got. And I don't think people noticed that we're kind of headed towards those days again. You know, unfortunately, I wish it were not so, but that's just going to happen. And by the way, that doesn't really have anything to do with an election. Like, you know, going back to your question about the election, that's going to happen regardless, man. Well, you know, either way, that's happening. We're on that train where we're going to have an unfortunate outcome one way or the other.
Well, speaking of that, then what do you think is going to bring an end to humanity first? AI or Taylor Swift?
They're the same thing. Think about Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift, she got famous because she was on The Voice or American Idol or like America's Got Talent. What are those stupid game shows, right? Stuff that normies watch. Like, normies watch TV. Yeah, I don't watch TV. But it's called programming for a reason, folks. It's called programming. You're being programmed. So much more productive when you give up those things. But how do you know that her songs aren't AI and that she's actually singing anything? You don't know.
I don't listen,
You
so
don't
I don't
know.
know. I don't care.
You don't know all
right,
those famous people, all those famous. Like I want. So AI, for example, do this as a fun experiment. You know, everybody's gonna be listening to this on YouTube anyway. Type in AI funk song or AI Motown or, you know, AI 50s music, or there's this whole genre of AI created music out there that's really entertaining. And the thing is a lot of it's getting really good. Like at first it was kind of funny. Like a few months ago, there was Obscurest Vinyl was the one. And I noticed it because they had some like really funny songs that it was singing that sounded like old, like Phil Spector Wall of Sound kind of deal. And like, you know, the Motown sound, that signature sound of Motown, like these, but it was all AI driven. Everything from the instrumentation to the production value to the vocals, but the lyrics were hilarious because they were really funny. Here's the thing is that some of them are not funny. Like some of them are serious songs they're creating. There's like this whole movement and it's all happening on YouTube and like Instagram and TikTok and stuff where there's AI songs from those eras that they're putting out as new music, and it sounds great. Like this is great stuff because that came from an era where they were making real music. When you hear throwaway trash of today, and that's all it is. It's just throwaway trash. We're not going to be listening to this a year from now. Nobody's going to be listening to this. We're still going to be listening to music from the 90s, from the 80s, from the 70s, from the 60s. We're going to be listening to that stuff for probably, you know, the remainder of humanity. The shit they're putting out in 2020, ain't nobody listening to that. Right? We ain't listening to that. So the music industry knows this. And so when they have their high production values and they're, you know, they put out the you know, Taylor Swift, for example, but there's been a lot of celebrities that have been caught doing this. They just dub them over. They just put them out there. Everything's lip synced and dubbed over, and they get out there and they do their number and they shake their ass. and they have their exact 59-minute, 59-second set, and then they disappear. They're off the stage, right? It's not them. And so, Taylor Swift is a creation. That's a brand. That's a brand. That is a product that's put out there. And in this era of AI and the sophistication of AI and voice replication and what we can do with that, which is incredible. It's very much a double-edged sword. I wouldn't be shocked at all to say that they're one and the same. And so what will bring about the end of humanity? Taylor Swift Terminators.
They're coming.
Take that one to the bank.
So now we're at the part of the show that everybody actually tuned in for, the part that everybody wants to watch. And that's where I flip it over, I flip it around and put you in charge. I give you the talking stick and let you either ask me questions or talk about whatever you want to talk about for a couple of minutes. So go ahead. You are in charge now.
What is your favorite Jeep of all time?
I like the CJ. We talked about the CJ earlier, but I think I'd have to say my favorite overall Jeep, the most capable Jeep for what I do, me and my wife do most often, which is rock crawling, is the TJ LJ, the 2004 through 2006 or 2005 through 2006 LJ, which is the slightly longer model of the TJ. I drive a JKU, which is the four-door, mine's a 2012 four-door, which is like driving a pregnant cow. And so when we got the second Jeep that my wife was going to be driving, we got what we thought was the best Jeep that there is. And that was a 2006 TJ LJ.
Oh, yeah.
Best Jeep ever made.
I had one.
You had one. You wished you had it now, don't you?
Man, I do. It was one of those points in life where you got to be an adult and you have to make decisions. And, it was... brings a tear to my eye. Not really.
I can imagine.
Kind of does. It was a Rubicon too. It was it was done right. It had a Pro Comp Stage 2 suspension under it, and it was epic. But
my wife driving around in her, it's the LJ is hers. I drive the pregnant cow, the JKU. She doesn't really know how to drive. I've been driving for off-roading for 8 or 10 years. She gets in. First or second time out, I took her up on a hard trail and she's going circles around me just because that thing is so small, not small, but compared to my pregnant cow, it's narrow, it's nimble, it's lightweight. It just goes right over everything. She got smaller tires, about the same lift, smaller tires. And she just drives it like a champ because it drives itself like a champ.
Yeah, I love them, man. I think that was behind the Scrambler. That was probably the best model of Jeep. The second question, what's your favorite band?
Shit, that's a good question. I think overall I own more music from the Beatles, from anybody than any other band. I think probably second would be Queen. And then it's averaged out over 100 or more small bands, everything from Charlie Daniels to ICP. So I guess the answer would be the Beatles.
Very cool. Certainly
shows you what kind of person I am.
Nah. I mean, that feeds into what I was saying about 1960s, 70s, 80s music and 90s.
And they made real music.
It was real music. I mean, people either love or hate the Beatles. There's kind of not really a you won't find anybody out there that's like, meh. Yeah, they're very, for whatever reason, they're very polarizing. I don't know why that is. There was that big rivalry too. Like it was like kind of a raw shock test of, Beatles or Rolling Stones. People that say Rolling Stones.
I thought you were going to say Beatles or the Monkees. Yeah, Beatles or Rolling Stones.
Yeah, the Beatles or Rolling Stones, man. It's like a raw shock test of, your personality. Like if you were a Beatles fan, you were kind of more like introverted, and if you're a Rolling Stones fan, like you're going to be the life of the party wherever you go. It's kind of like a little baseline psychiatric test kind of deal. It was neat. Favorite movie? What's your favorite movie of all time?
Easy. The Shining. Best movie ever made.
Not a bad answer. Certainly not
the correct answer.
What got you into making YouTube videos?
In 2014, I did a little project down at California Salton Sea. I've got some videos on my YouTube about Salton Sea. It's the largest lake in California. It's a whole thing. And as part of that, I started making videos, kind of promotional videos, fun, snappy little music type videos to kind of promote this little project that I had going on. And I enjoyed doing that. And the reason that I bought my Jeep was because of that project I was doing at Salton Sea, because I needed something that could get around the shoreline without getting stuck in the mud. I completed that project quite successfully, by the way. And then I started making videos of me learning how to off-road. And that's why my channel is called The Not a Rubicon, because the Jeep's name is the Not a Rubicon, and the Jeep is named the Not a Rubicon because if you know Jeeps, you know that the Rubicon is the top level trim of a Jeep. Mine is not a Rubicon, so it is the Not a Rubicon. So I started out as an off-road channel, this current channel, and that just kind of wound down. We did some videos that were real popular. We had an actual semi-professional show on Amazon Prime Video called In 4 Low that did extremely well for a zero budget bunch of little videos. Brought that over after our contract with them was up, brought that onto YouTube along with our other videos, off-roading videos, just regular off-roading videos. They just did like crap. Nobody wants to watch them on YouTube. And I started making radio videos, and I am the superstar that I am today. So basically the answer to the question is I got bored.
I love it. I love it, man.
Thank you. We're actually a little over time, longer than I planned, but hopefully everybody watched all the way to get to the good part at the end. So thanks a lot for joining, and I hope you had fun, and we will talk to you later.